Oh, thank you for coming today. You're in the barrel. I think we ought to. I think I should have Tim. Tim is my partner in crime on this deal, and uh, Tim and I are on opposite ends of the psychology spectrum, in the sense that I came up through the logos, the very rationalistic sort of way. And Tim came up from the artistic side, the Eros side. And somehow we've met in the middle and have some common interests. So Tim, why don't you explain to Mike what it is we've been trying to do here? It's actually Tim's idea, by the way. So.
Mhm.
Well, I've always been upset and irritated over the fact that we live in a culture that has so few rituals, and especially rituals around loss. And thank heavens we have funerals so that we can at least mourn the loss of a person. But any other kind of loss that we experience, we just have no way of dealing with it in a communal situation. You just have to deal with it on your own. I just got an email this morning from Steve Thomas, who some of you know, who had lost a son. And at work, they gave him 3 days off to sort of collect his thoughts. And he said that was just so inadequate. But it's really a indication of where we are as a society, that we just have no means of dealing with any kind of loss other than an individual who dies. And so in a time like this, where all of us are dealing with all kinds of psychic stresses, and some of us have lost jobs and some have lost communities that they're a part of, there's really no way to collectively deal with the sense of grief and anger and sadness and loneliness that comes up. So this is an attempt to try to deal with that a little bit, and to give everybody involved an opportunity to just check in with each other, to be part of a community that is concerned about these things. And during the coronavirus, of course, all of the incidents goes way, way up, and all of us are stuck in our homes. And gosh, I find myself just missing human contact of any kind. And so this kind of an opportunity gives me the chance to connect with other people and just find out how, what other people's stories are. So tell us where you are located.
I'm in Berkeley, California.
Oh,
and
great.
Where are you all located? I know where Skip is.
Well, one other thing, that Tim won't blow his own horn, so let me do it because it'll interest you, Mike, and that is that Tim is the first American artist to have a solo show at the Hermitage in St. Petersburg. And that was nearly 30 years ago now, but nonetheless, it was an achievement in his artistic career, and he's been a professional artist all his life. And he did the award for the UN Women's Peace Prize, and also he did a prize for Bishop Desmond Tutu, and for Coretta King, I believe, and others. So those are things that would probably interest you, I think. So anyway, so what we are usually ask folks to do is to recount stories from their life first, and then we interact. And you can limit or expand that all you want. You can just limit it to things you have experienced with me over the years, if you like. That's fair enough.
But yeah, we're eager to hear some dirt on Skip, so I'm loaded.
But Deborah is in Montgomery County, Maryland. She's a psychologist and um, interested. She's the one and only person ever to write a review for my novel, which is called Mako Memoirs of a Woman, which I wrote under my pen name. And Idris is in Vancouver, and Miles is in Calgary, Canada, also Alberta. And Joss Sangalang is a retired psychiatrist, and she lives in Honolulu. But she used to live here, so we've known each other for 20 years or so. So we'll just get into it with you. There are like 90 or so people that have this link, so others may join us over the hour, I'm hopeful. But in any case, we do have 5 people right now already watching on YouTube, including Nick Chan, who's one of our regulars and who will be telling his story on Saturday night. We do a Saturday night session, which is aimed to reach Australia, Singapore, and East Asia. And Nick is in Singapore, so he's watching on YouTube and might come up with some chats on YouTube. So I'm just monitoring that as well. But I'll shut up, and why don't you tell us whatever part of your story you're willing to tell, including things like your political work, your work in China, how it is that you are in the movie Amadeus. That's an interesting fact of Mike's life, and a few other things.
Well, I'd be curious also to hear people's observations on where they are and how they're feeling. And what did Tim say? Opportunity to give people community regarding loss. But I mean, the society probably doesn't give people enough opportunity for community around loss at any rate.
Right, absolutely not.
So I met Skip 50 years, God knows, more than 50 years ago. And
56 years ago, to be precise.
Oh, you're right. Oh, wow. Skip, that's terrible. No wonder I'm feeling so tired today.
Our freshman year at Hamilton, we were both working in the kitchen. You was a waiter, I think, and I was the kitchen helper, I believe, in those days.
Yeah. So anyway, we went to school together, and at the time, I think we had quite different views of the world, and we brought different experiences, which had shaped our views. And while I respected Skip, I did not agree with him. And we both were mentored by the same professor, basically, and studied Asian history. Skip, I think you were more interested in Japanese history, and I was more interested in Chinese history. And so anyway, and then we reconnected at a 40th reunion, which was really great. And we have both had moved considerable distance over the years, both physically, economically, psychologically, and certainly politically. So I come from a very solid working class background. My father's a truck driver. I was the first one in my family educated. So to go to this rather posh, competitive college was an interesting experience for me. Basically, I went at a time when there were still quotas against Jews. There was no de facto quota in our school against Blacks, but we had only one African American in our class, who was actually in your fraternity, wasn't he, Skip? Yeah, Kenny Field, my next door neighbor. So, it was an interesting experience. It was, it opened my eyes a lot. Although coming from a kind of a working class background, I had a certain perspective anyway. And
So just a minute, because we're being joined by our friend from India, Khushbu Kantaria, and I'd like her to hear that last sentence that you had. Khushbu has told us her story, so her story is on the website. But Khushbu,
hi, Khushbu.
Khushbu lost her mother when she was 9 years old and was raised in two orphanages in India. And
where about?
in Ahmedabad and then in Mumbai. And she now lives in Bangalore. And she's a very capable woman at this time, having learned all her lessons from the School of Hard Knocks. But you were talking about your working class background, so I wonder if you just repeat that sentence so that Khushbu can hear it too.
Oh, many decades ago, and we came to the same place, but from different places. Skip came from a military background, military family, and I came from a very working class background. And I'm sure it steered our education. And anyway, it was a decent academic education, and it was a pretty good political one too, because it's a very old boys school, and very conservative, very right wing. You couldn't get more waspy, I don't think, than that place. What do you think, Skip?
Yes, it definitely is a waspy place, and I always thought it was a little lefty school. I didn't think of it as a right wing school, and and the funny thing is, Mike,
you're wrong. But beyond that,
okay, well, I may be wrong, and definitely I went back to Hamilton one Veterans Day on an airplane with Oliver North, which is a story I'll tell maybe in this session. But in any case, I think a lot of people had the wrong impression of me, because what I really felt in myself was that I was pretty left wing. But when I tried to join the Marine Corps, which I was only doing because it was the family business, and I always knew I was going to go in the service first. Whether I stayed in the service was a different question, but I had always intended to go into the service, and this was not my father's wish, by the way, but nonetheless, first sons often do what their fathers do, and so I did that. But I didn't think of myself as right wing at that time. I only thought I was following in my father's footsteps. And what surprised me very much is that the football team came and created a cordon 3 men deep around the table where the selection officer from the Marines was trying to talk to people. And I'm probably the only guy he talked to that day. But I literally had to fight my way through the football team before I could talk to the Marine officer selection officer. And that was on March the 7th.
What we had done actually at that time, what we did was organized a blockade, a human chain.
Right.
Road.
You might have been there in these blockades. This was on March the 7th, 1967, when I signed up for the Marines. But in any case,
we had a human cordon blocking the recruiters, and then we followed them into the recruiting place, and it wasn't, there were a couple, I was surprised, there were a couple of football players that actually were helping us. But yeah, and then we were blockading people from recruiting. Unfortunately, we didn't block Cat Ferguson, but one of our classmates, the only one who signed up that day to show how patriotic he was, and ended up dying. So anyway, we're coming from a little bit different perspectives and moved over the years, I'm sure. So
very much, because I now think I'm, besides, with the exception of you, Mike, I think I'm the most left person I know, but with the exception of you. But anyway, carry on.
Anyway, so I had a very working class perspective. The school reinforced that because it was very elitist. So we had to work, and we served others. We served our classmates, and I went on from there to go to something called. Well, I was active in high school. I was active in SNCC and CORE, which are nonviolent Southern, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. CORE was the Congress of Racial Equality. We had chapters. We did work in the ghettos with people, and we were in demonstrations. And I just hosted an old classmate of mine who not only went to Cuba to cut cane, but she's been working as an AIDS nurse in Cuba for years. And she was doing a book tour on a book she just did, Waking in Havana, which dealt with being an AIDS nurse in Havana for years. So I got out of Hamilton and I was going on to Yale, but in the interim, I spent the summer down at the Poor People's March in Washington, D.C., and working there, teaching there, going to the Democratic Convention, and hitchhiking up and down, back and forth all over the country, which was more education than I got at Yale for sure. Anyway, I spent the next year at Yale pretending to study Asian history, sleeping in the libraries, and then went down for the tail end of the civil rights movement in the South. Unfortunately, nobody told them that it was the tail end of the civil rights movement, that it was all over. But because it was being vigorously pursued. We had cross burnings. We had people with guns that went through the campus. I was recruited out of Yale and taught at a small college in Eastern Kentucky, the coal country, right where West Virginia, Kentucky, and Virginia meet, and worked with Eastern Kentucky Welfare Rights. I went back to Connecticut where I lived for vacation, came back, and our center had been burned to the ground, and everyone who was working in it was arrested. We had a cross burning. I was organizing for people to participate in the anti-war movement, including the two big marches in DC. And very strangely, they did not renew my contract to teach at that school. In fact, actually, I remember a really interesting faculty meeting where I brought up the fact that we had a couple of Black students. They were chased through the town. They were threatened with their lives. They were harassed. And I brought it up at the faculty meeting, and I was booed. Called for a division of the House. I was roundly booed and wasn't allowed to speak because of all the noise. It was a mess. Did not renew my contract. And I thought, this is interesting. I love Kentucky, but I was watching TV and I saw this wonderful place where it was warm, where it was sunny, where the kids had long hair and were out in the beaches. And I said, I'm going there. So I took refuge in California and went back to school at Stanford. And it was not quite nirvana, but it was quite a bit different. And worked there, picked up a second master's, this one in American history, and at neither place did I finish my doctorate, but I did do some teaching in college. So was very active at Stanford in a variety of things, got arrested, worked with farm workers, worked with anti-war movement, moved up to Berkeley and worked in Berkeley for the city. First as programs administrator, where I met my dear friend Barbara Lee. I was her project monitor, and we've been friends over 40 years. Barbara has been our Congresswoman now for 20, and we've kind of grown together. She's wonderful. So anyway, up in Berkeley, and in Berkeley I became active, went from protest to politics. So we organized and took over the city government in progressive administration for 40 years. What does that mean? It means relatively decent programs, as good as you can get under less decent national administration. So we've controlled the mayoralty, the city council, boards and commissions, and I've been on a bunch of boards and commissions in Berkeley, and been able to do some relatively progressive things in an urban area, but mainly because it's Berkeley, it's the Bay Area, and people are, you know, a little bit aware. But anyway, that's where I ended up, which is a pretty far cry from Hamilton College in upstate New York, and it's been good, no complaints, and very enjoyable. So there we go. That's a start on whatever.
Well, then you went on to China. And,
yeah, I've been doing, I was a city planner, and I actually went over to, I was also the president of the union, and they fired me illegally, totally illegally. I remember sitting talking with the city manager. I said, Dan, you can't do this. It's not legal. He said, I don't care. They ended up having to pay me a year's back pay. And I said, okay, I'm going to work in San Francisco. And in San Francisco, I rose to be deputy director for the city of San Francisco land use planning. I didn't think they were going to have a commie be director. So I think I had reached my basically, not controlling their land, because in land inheres wealth. And so anyway, so it was a good gig, worked there for 20 years, became a consultant to the government of China. I might say, without, in a competitive process, without them having the slightest idea that I was a good socialist, and worked as a consultant to the government of China on both the national level and provincial level, off and on for 16 years. Great job, horrible commute, but a lot of fun and very interesting. Best food in the world and wonderful people, and interesting alternative to what we do here. Although a lot of the same problems, some of the same solutions, and some a little bit of an improvement. So consultant to the government of China.
Yeah. And Mike has a travel schedule like you wouldn't believe, because I don't know.
We're here now, but we were evacuated from New Zealand during the epidemic. And we were, they told us we'd have to get out. We were on the Southern Island, and what do you call it? Sound, Milford Sound, in a national park. And they told us in 48 hours, you'll probably be evacuated. 2 hours later, they said, pack your things and get on the bus. We got on the bus with an airport in mind. Australia wouldn't take us. So they canceled our Australian flight, and we had nowhere to go. We were on a bus to nowhere. And what happened was that by the time we got off, our very intrepid guide had lined up some transportation for us. So we flew around the clock, 4 airports, and got back, and we're in Berkeley.
Wow.
So that was, yeah. We travel a lot anyway. Yeah. My wife was born in China, and we try to go back as much as possible. We're supposed to go back in September, but it looks like we won't be doing that. So
yeah, it looks like we're all going to be stuck at home for a while. Home alone.
Could be worse. Although I've got to tell you, from the bottom of my heart, I wanted to stay in New Zealand. Lana said no. New Zealand was really wonderful. Not just beautiful and decent food, nice people, but a really excellent, like social democratic government run by labor with good social welfare state, and amazing prime minister. Jacinda Ardern is fantastic. Not only did she perform well under that horrible mosque tragedy last year, but she is running the best anti-coronavirus program in the world right now. They didn't even, they're in, they may be in double digits by now as far as casualties, but they run a really tight ship and a good one. So
Yeah.
we
Here's
travel.
another example of women around the world, women leaders who have been able to really stay on top of this whole thing.
Yeah, probably better than the men. Although to some degree it's gender, but I think as much it's class. But
Say more about that.
oh, I think it's where you come from. I mean, we've got, look at Margaret Thatcher. She a great woman leader? Yeah.
No.
So I think, for every good one, you can find a bad one of whatever gender. But she happens to be fantastic. And you're right, a lot of that, maybe it's because now there are a lot of good political women leaders. We've got some in the United States.
Yeah.
Well, members of this group would point out that in terms of a Jungian understanding of the psyche, women are able to embody those wonderful community values of nurture and responsiveness that men find it harder to access. And I think this is a good example of how we're seeing. I agree with you that women aren't being a woman doesn't necessarily turn you into a certain kind of personality, but if you look across the scope of history, you often see women leaders taking a more responsive approach than the males. And I think our time right now is a perfect example of that. I can't think of any bad women leaders anywhere in the country or in the world right now.
How about the governor of Iowa?
Well, yeah, within the U.S., that's right. Yeah.
I think it's interesting. Anecdotal, we don't want to get too much just anecdotal. I mean, we've studied history. Skip, you remember Zushi?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, there's Catherine the Great. There's a lot of people on different sides. There's a lot of anecdotal stuff. And I think you're right to a certain degree. I think probably psychological helps inform, but I think ultimately it's a more sociological or more class perspective that elevates people, because ultimately they're not serving individuals, they're serving large swaths of people. And if they're not plugged into that, they're missing it.
So what were you doing in New Zealand?
Oh, we were just rummaging. We travel a lot. It was not professional. So we were there in the national park, and we have been just going around the islands. So it was fun. It was beautiful.
One year I was talking to Mike, and he was going to do the Trans-Siberian Railway and end up in Beijing and then go to South Africa, right?
We had quite a trip. We went to, I had to negotiate with Lana because, a week and a half, 2 weeks on a railway wasn't, and I thought it'd be perfect. I loved the idea. So anyway, we got off at Lake Baikal, and we took a red eye from Irkutsk down to Beijing because we'd been in Mongolia the previous year. We spent part of the winter on the Gobi Desert in the yurt. And I love Ulaanbaatar, but it's like a one visit place. So we flew. Skip, you've been there. I mean, it's interesting, but
yeah. Anyway,
to Beijing and down Beijing, and then we cut across, and we ran over the top of China we followed the wall out to the holy Buddhist shrine grottos out to Tibet, and then went through Tibet. because Lan hadn't been to Tibet. I've been to Tibet a couple times, 3 now, I think. And so we wanted to go to Tibet because when we had been in Nepal, they wouldn't have they changed the scheduling on the Chinese airlines. And I promised her someday we'd go back to Tibet. So we went back through Tibet. Mm-hmm. That was fun. Anyway, we travel a good amount, as much as possible. So you can imagine what this is doing to us now. I'd much rather be on the road, but there it is. Anyway, so this group, I'd be curious to know more about the group. I mean, that's a lot about me. It's blah, 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 blah. But I'd be more curious to learn about this group. I'm assuming there are no Trumpers here, right?
No, there are no Trumpers here, I think. Kushbu lost it on that.
Exactly.
Yeah, and we'll ask you to give some advice to Kushbu a little bit later. The group, how did the group? Well, as you know, I've been studying Jungian psychology for a very long time, since 1987. And, you know, what I've found over the years is that whenever I got into trouble, and I've gotten into trouble a few times.
You have.
Pardon?
You have. I'll attest
to that. I always needed something to balance my psyche because, you know, the 9 years between 2010 and 2009 or 2019 were very tough years for me, but, you know, I got out of it what I needed to get out of it. But I also learned some lessons about the man during that time, right? And Mike has been my wingman during that time. I would say. I mean, if Mike hadn't been there, I don't know if I could have.
I must say, I'm so impressed with the distance you've traveled, whether it's psychological or political, the whole thing. I mean, you know, living is learning, and you've learned as much as anyone I know. Seriously.
Oh, thank you. Well,
some of it painful.
Yeah, and I mean, I remember you coming back to maybe it was sophomore year at Hamilton after having been to Mississippi with CORE or something in the summertime, and I never had the luxury to be able to do something like that because I was struggling throughout Hamilton just to keep up. Hamilton College is a very challenging school, and I started it off with
cracker, but that's all right.
Pardon?
Nothing.
Well, I mean,
I'm just showing my roots. It's tough. It's a tough.
Well, I started.
Where's Hamilton located? Hamilton College.
Clinton, New York. Clinton, New York.
And where were you born, Skip?
Biloxi, Mississippi. Believe it or not.
Biloxi, Mississippi. Okay.
I was born on an Army Air Force base in Biloxi, Mississippi, called Keesler Air Force Base. Now it's an Air Force base, but at that time it was Army. But my father was a naval officer, so he was stationed in Gulfport, Mississippi at the time, which there's a CB base there. But I sort of got behind the 8 ball at Hamilton because at Thanksgiving holiday of our freshman year, I was in an auto accident. I wasn't driving, fortunately, but one of our classmates was killed, Stuart Kanoff, and that really messed me up pretty bad. And Mike will remember that at that time, every Saturday night, I was cooking steaks on the back loading dock of the kitchen every Saturday night. That was one of my jobs. And the Saturday after we came back from Thanksgiving vacation, I had my hand up against the door of the kitchen, and it was one of these big loading dock doors, and the thing slammed onto my middle finger right at the end of it. And I still have the scar from that. And the door slammed and it was shut, and I was locked out of the kitchen and alone on this loading dock. And so it took a while. I don't even remember how I got out of that situation, but my hand was stuck in the door, and the part of the weather stripping went through my finger. So the following Monday, I guess it was, I was walking up across campus with this huge splint on my middle finger, white splint on my middle finger. and Mike's and my common savior. He was certainly my savior, and my father and local parentis pulled me aside and tried to figure out what was happening. And he didn't really kick in at that time, but then at Christmas time, I got totally obliterated drunk, and I went off to Christmas, and I was sort of unconscious for 3 days, and I had a hangover for 2 weeks because my roommate and I had drunk a fifth of Johnny Walker Red Label in 30 minutes. Which was not very good. We probably very nearly killed ourselves. But in any case, we came back from Christmas vacation, and I was not in a good way psychologically at that point. And I flunked a lot of final exams. And so at the end of my first semester, I had 4 Ds and a C. And so I was put on academic probation, and that professor, Edwin B. Lee, pulled me aside and saw me through the next semester, and basically fathered me, because my actual father was in Japan still serving with the Navy. And and so I had a tough freshman year, and I stayed on campus over the summer, and that, I think, was the summer Mike went to Core or SNCC for something down south, maybe Mississippi or something. I remember, Mike, you coming back and telling about your experiences and being kind of jealous that you had done that. And part of the reason was that I never understood I never understood enough about what had happened to Blacks in the United States, because in the Navy, Blacks were treated pretty well overall. And I always knew that doing bad things to Black men wasn't a good thing from the time I was 6 years old. And that was because I was in Kodiak, and I had gone to kindergarten in a red building. There was like a soccer field in the middle of the base, and it was surrounded by all these officer houses. At one end of the soccer field was the admiral's house, and at the other end was this little red schoolhouse. So I'd gone to kindergarten there, and then they took it over for a BOQ. And my father was telling me one day, and mind you, I'm 6 years old, he was telling me that this Black chief was going to live in this building, and it was going to be a bachelor enlisted quarters for a period of time. And he was going to be there because he couldn't stay at the regular bachelor enlisted quarters. So he was going to have this entire building, and I really couldn't understand why that was. And so my dad was telling me about discrimination in the Navy at that time, and um, he said that there had been a midshipman at the Naval Academy who was the first Black to go to the Naval Academy, and the other midshipman had taken him out and left him on a buoy out in the middle of the Chesapeake Bay, and he had died of exposure. And so from that time, 6 years old, until about 10 years ago, or no, 15 years ago, let's say, I thought that my father might have been involved in that. And I was very embarrassed by that. And it was only later when I happened to have a Black doctor who told me that incident had occurred in 1880 or something like that. So I said, oh, whew. So my dad wasn't involved in that incident, but it had really, that kind of discrimination had really shocked me from age 6. And I remember that very clearly. And so that's why I was jealous that you had gone and I hadn't had the opportunity to go. I probably would have if I'd known how to do it and how to afford it. But in any case, but I was up to my neck in bad grades and just surviving at Hamilton. So I did survive, and then the rest is history. And so Asia Ed Lee then was the main professor, my main go-to professor, and it was Mike that told me recently that he had died, and I actually told his story in an advanced reading group at some point. But anyway, I started this group about 4 years ago, Mike, and originally I was just doing a weekly session at a local pizza restaurant. And then I said, well, okay, I can take some advanced students now. So I started an advanced reading group. And so we were over there on that advanced reading group, which we still meet. And I guess everybody here, with the exception of Joss, is active in the advanced reading group. And we've read some very tough Jungian books in the last 2.5, 3 years. And then Tim had a numinous experience, let's say, about 8 weeks ago. And he was talking to me about the need for a group where we just get together and without going into Jungian stuff so much, would actually be supportive of one another. And as Tim explained earlier, and so that's how we got here. And so you're welcome to be with us also. We're having some very interesting conversations lately.
Yeah. And I would just add on the back end of what you said, Mike, about the makeup of the group. I would really like to have more conservative members of the group, but my experience has been that the more conservative members around us of our society just are not that interested in dialogue, or at least that's been my experience. I've been really trying to get into more conversations with people on that side of the spectrum. And I'm having a real difficult time just just hanging on to people who will engage with me. I've got one high school buddy that is a real conservative Mormon, and he and I have known each other since, age 12 or 13 or something like that. And I oftentimes will engage with him on serious issues, and I'm pretty gobsmacked often on the way he puts things together. But I'm really grateful that he persists, that he keeps calling me, that he will keep asking questions about how I think about things. And I really think that that's a wonderful way to move forward. I just kind of am sad that we don't have more people from that side of the spectrum in this group. But like to hear how other people feel about this. It seems to me that just simply the fact of being open to talking to anybody and being willing to listen to people from different perspectives kind of ends up weeding out those people. So anybody else have thoughts about that?
I think you're right.
Oh, may I speak?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead, Chaz.
Skip, in my past, I did a lot of politickings before.
Mm-hmm.
And I moved on because, and meaning moved on is that I became more apolitical, and either because, here you're in this Jungian group, you in the Jungian, you highlight the contrast of anima and animus. But I think for me, I've moved on further and moved to the mundi side of what Darian spoke of in her talk about the various stages that the anima goes through, and even beyond the anima, and into the mundi state where all is whole, that you get to a point in your psyche where now there's a blend of the anima and the animus, and it's all neutral. And that is the state that I would like to hold myself in and stay focused and grounded in the heart, to find the commonality in everyone, to find the commonality that makes us alive and appreciate being alive, and to stay in that groundedness of love and compassion, that no matter what the differences are, we are here for being together, being connected as one. And that's the whole, you might say, psyche for me. And why I'm here is because I want to enjoy the company of big-hearted people with wonderful intelligence and just this longing to connect. And that's where Tim, I'm totally in agreement of. I think it's very, very important in this world to stay connected, regardless of differences, and that we have to somehow bridge that differences, because the more we highlight opposites, the more contention we have and the more emphasis we have on separation. So I'm here to be a part of the whole and stay grounded in that, but yet appreciate the differences that we all have. We're all individuals, and differences, like they say, vive la différence, right? There's beauty in diversity. Yeah. And Mike, you mentioned that you went to Cuba and you've been in China, and I've been there too. And it's wonderful to see how people from all over different cultures, not only survive, but thrive. And that's where also I appreciate Skip's, where he comes from, because he has a more international minded outlook on things. And I think that's really, really beautiful. And it's more needed now in this world rather than a narrow-minded scope.
Right.
That's it.
Let me just add here that we currently have Penelope with us, but she's going to have to leave us in 15 minutes. So let me just mention something about Penelope. She's in London, and she had an abusive childhood, let's call it that. And it was very difficult for her. And she has PTSD as a result of it. And we sort of got together because I have a very mild case of PTSD, nothing compared to her, but Penelope does counsel people with PTSD. So Penelope, do you want to say something while you're here? Oh, we can't hear you.
I'm here.
Okay.
Yes, I will. And what I found, I mean, I will bring this up, and I'm not staying for long because I've got some work to go to shortly. But what where I picked up with Tim there. Hi, Tim. The bit that I heard, or that something came to mind, I find in general relationships, I find very easy to interact with people, but when relationships get intimacy, I have huge problems with, with my attachment style, I've noticed, which can create problems where we have boundaries. So whilst there's a lot of love in the world, it's like sometimes that we'll want love from, particular people, like my mother, who's never loved me or never gave me love. So the recreation of choosing people that reflect that mother type that never gave you, and then we repeat that. So I think a lot of us can be, lonely. Even at this time, it's like, whilst I have the access to people, I'm not getting the intimacy that I need from other souls. So it's like, yeah, I can have great conversations on astrology or this, but there's intimacy where to be loved, and having to come back to love self is a very difficult task for all of us, and to bond with that inner child to the point that I'm soothing that child that's not being loved in the way that I felt I've needed. It's sad that yes, the general relationships are great, but the intimacy is pretty much, it just isn't really there on a day-to-day basis. It's difficult. That's my own personal thing.
Yeah, that's really true. And boy, that resonates with me a lot, because I think a lot of us, as far as I know, are introverts, and I am a pretty extreme introvert and have been getting more so as I get older. But I really appreciate human contact, and there is nothing that replaces that. I mean, it's helpful to have animals like Kushbu, who lives with 8 dogs, but there's nothing like human contact. And I keep coming back to this group and others for that reason. And having said that, I need to go to another group. So thanks very much, Michael, for being part of our
thank you, Tim.
interaction.
What you're doing.
Tim,
Yeah.
could you wait just a second so I could say,
Yeah.
Your wishes come true, my dear.
Well, good.
I am a conservative.
Well, good.
I am not a Trumper. Hey, believe me, a lot of Republicans didn't want him,
Yeah.
me included. But I really quickly want to say that I really appreciate what Josh said about being non-political or apolitical, because since I worked for the Army in a classified position for 35 years, I served under 9 presidents, and you have to take care of all of them. when you're the publications control officer for the Department of Defense.
I'm going to have to bow out, but the only thing I'd like to say is that, you know, in society, there are problems. And
Yes.
if you care about social justice as much as yourself, although you've got to start with yourself, you need to take action. And withdrawing is not a solution if you're civic minded. So I think in action, in work, in what we do, we define ourselves, not through withdrawing and not through being. So I resonate to what Tim said. And I think that the problem with society when you withdraw is that nobody is trying to make it better. And sometimes you have to do it and it results in conflict. But if you see social justice, injustice, you need to take action.
Yeah.
Otherwise, what does it say about yourself, where you are, psychologically or otherwise? It's not right.
I agree. I agree very much. My father was born in Bowman, Arkansas. And there was a sign at each end of the little town saying, "No niggers allowed." And I was born in Cleveland. My parents met in the military. My mother was a journalist. And my father was in the military. That's where they met and got married. And we ended up back in Cleveland. And I heard the way my father spoke about Black people in a very predominantly Black city, which was Cleveland. And I couldn't have been but 4 or 5 years old when I said to myself in my heart, I will never be this way. And when I became that high level, I was publications control officer for the largest Army command, and I was over the print shop and the message center and graphics and pubs and forums and all that. All of the people who worked for me near Washington, D.C., my print clerk, my secretary, in fact, had been an Air Force mechanic. They were all African Americans. And I'm kind of about as opposite as you can get. You can't get much paler than I am. And I was so glad that I made that promise to myself when I was a child, because I fought hard for my employees. And I fought hard for the people. I'm near Washington, D.C. I'm a minority. And people are people, and I love people. And so you can be a conservative and still fight for equal rights for people. And I guess that's the point I want to bring up, is that I think I went the conservative route because of my position. I did travel quite a bit, like you guys have done. I was injured overseas. I wasn't supposed to be, but I was. I was essential personnel. I wasn't active duty, but I was injured overseas. And getting me back into the country was difficult. And
No,
I'm still paying for it today.
But I've got to say that conserving, the very act of conservatism, is conserving a society that is not just and not good. Change is the nature of the universe. We change, we improve. We're always hopefully striving to improve. And what I see with conservatism, the conservatives are the ones who fought against abolishing slavery. The conservatives are the ones who fought against giving women rights. The conservatives, oh, they didn't? I think you may need to look at history a little bit more, my dear.
I study history a lot because I'm a writer.
Martin Luther King was a Republican. Just to
Martin
remind
Luther King was not a Republican. No.
I knew that I was going out on a limb to say this today.
Oh, I think disagreement is good, because I think things change, not by burying them, but things change by confronting differences. That's not conservatism. That's progress. That's dialectical.
That's why I say I'm apolitical.
Right. So
yes, you've got to register for a party at some point.
yeah.
And
So
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead, Kushbu. I knew Kushbu would want to get into this because she and I had a 3-hour-long conversation this morning, and she was talking about what to do about the fact that India is becoming more Nazi. So, which is
Yeah, Modi's a character, isn't he?
yeah. So
And
and so she actually needs some political advice from Mike. So go ahead, go ahead, Kushbu.
well, you were just saying, do the right thing, take the action, right? That's what Sir Michel was saying. And I'm like, just sure, I'm naturally doing it, but just help me to not get into trouble. Like I will be I will be way more efficient in everything you ever wish to do. And I'm not a
I loved Mahatma Gandhi. I loved his nonviolent style. And I have a lot of quotes from him. I really admired that man.
so yeah, so I think that's where thank you for saying this, because that's where I was coming from, that I'm not an activist, or I'm not a psychologist, something like that, mental health professional or something like that. That's not even somewhere I want to. I'm a social worker, and Gandhi Bapu also said that I'm not a politics, I'm a social worker, you know, or I'm not a preacher or anything like that. So that is where I am also coming from, right? I am a social worker, and in fact, whatever, such a bad politics and such a bad system and everything is, lot of things is bad in India, but I lived in a government run shelter home for what, 7 years, and I'm cool people. So things are not, system is there, um, system is there, and system is really taking care of, man. So for me, it's not about the politics at all. Like I I don't know, if I have to have a nice talk with Modi, I will have it. I will not hate him. I know he's stupid Gujarati who wants a lot of money. I totally get it. You know, like 60-year-old stupid Gujarati baby boomer kind of whatever they say. So as a social worker, help me out. Just not yeah, just stay out of trouble, but do the right thing. Yeah. Yeah.
Can I add something? I was going to leave now, but I just wanted to add something myself, briefly on the politic thing, that I think with my early trauma, that my main thing, I remember being very small and walking to school and seeing a bunch of kids bullying another child, like being very nasty. And I stopped on my own and stood up for this person that I didn't know, and a group of girls around this other girl being very nasty. And it's been all my life, it's been about protecting people from trauma, and that's been my focus in life. But it started very early, which is really quite beautiful to look back on. And so I've never gone the political route myself.
Yeah.
I've voted once in my life, so I could really upset a lot of people out there.
Was there a question in that?
No. It was just me talking about, the idea of people's beliefs, and then what we project. What I've picked up on recently is the projection of everything that we go through, religions, even astrology. It's all a projection. Somebody told me off about astrology, saying it's just a projection. And then I thought, well, isn't everything, ultimately? And then we've got the real facts that are happening. Even God, it's like we're projecting something that's in a light out there, and that there's some reward at the end, and none of us really know. So we've got a way to go.
Well, I wanted to thank everyone, and thank you, Penelope, and thank everyone for entertaining me saying something. And I want to thank Skip for organizing the group, but I've got to bow out too. So
Okay.
Okay, me too. I've got to go too. But
Good
thank
work.
you.
I just have a quick question. I was just wondering, with all your social activities and initiatives, did you ever know David Hartsoe? David Hartsoe, he was a Quaker, and he met President Kennedy as a student.
How would I know him?
Okay, so just because you're very active.
We did bump in. Did I do anything or?
Yeah. Anyway, I just thought, I'd just like to make a point that, John F. Kennedy, he talked about a peace race, but all we usually hear is that he talked about a space race. But I really appreciated his speech where he says, "Let's have a peace race." Thank
Certainly,
you, Michael.
that way it's more constructive. I think you're headed towards something you want, not toward a conflict. Thanks so much. Thank you, everyone.
Right.
Be
Thanks,
well.
Mike, for being
breaking it down.
here.
Thanks.
Appreciate it. Take care.
Thanks.
Yeah, I want to say something about politics.
Yeah,
I think
go ahead.
most people like me, we are not interested in politics, but sometimes we have to involve because it affects us. Like I was joining the Chinese group actually against I-1000. It's funny, like sometimes the government, they have this, they said they want to protect certain minority groups. They end up has set up this policy actually hurting them. Like, for example, they said minority are disadvantaged in education, but somehow Asian are out of this minority, even the Asian are minority because they work really hard to study. They said, we have to have a different criteria for college because we don't want all the Asian kids flooded the good school, which is understandable. You want diversity. But at the same time, you cannot judge people by their race. That's you have to judge by their quality, not by their race. So anyway, so I was with the Chinese group. We went to Olympia. We were doing demonstration and doing all this, and it's very time consuming. I was joining the Bellevue School Board, competition. So all this I wasn't intend to do, but they need someone to do it, and then they asked me. I said, why not? I give it a try. So I get involved. It take me a lot of time. And then luckily we won. Almost impossible, we actually win. So they were, at first, the government, they want to pass it without even asking people to vote. Then we were able to collect lots of signatures. So we were able to, so let people vote instead of they make decision closed doors. I found a lot of time the government, they're using this pretending, I'm not sure pretending, they said it's a good intention. They protecting the minority, but in the end, they create this dependency and really hurting them. I heard, I'm not sure it's true or not, I heard they said like in Chicago, there are a lot of kids, single parents, Black people, and the reason they have so many families like that, because government step in to give them money. And then they don't need their husband anymore. So government become their husband to pay all the money. That's why they keep having all these kids to get more money. And they create this dependency on them and create big chaos of the society. I think a lot of time they have good intention to solve problem, but they don't really see the problem in a bigger picture. In the end, they make the things worse. So the same thing, like you said, they helping minority with business owner, but did they ask the minority business owner, do they really want to be helped that way? Could they differentiate them from other group of people? They don't. Even though I was in the PTA board meeting, and we have this conference, and the funny part is like they said, the race, the income affects school score, and the data shows very clearly the income had more influence on schools student score than race, but the parents still, PTA board still want to put the race the first. And I was working against it. I said, I'm minority. And the data shows very clearly, it's the income, the most important influence, not the race. Why we put race the first? And they said, there's no order, there's no importance of order. I said, you may think it's not important of order, but people read it. They will think there's an important of the first thing important on the front, the less important on the following it. You know, so it's like, I said, why you emphasize all the people in the majority of them are white, and they think they do something for minority. And I said, I'm the minority. I said, I don't need you to do this for us. It's hurting us instead of helping us. So it's kind of funny. Like that's why I was asking all other parents. I said, you guys need to involve in the PTA because they make decisions or make policies that didn't ask for your opinion, and they said they're helping you, but it's not helping you. You know, they're hurting you. So anyway, so that's my opinion. A lot of time, maybe they have good intention. Maybe they really think they need help, but did they really ask them? Do they want to be helped like this? That's sometimes I said I'm not interested in politics at all. But I was forced to involve many times, because I see the injustice or something. I want to change it, and I was forced to evolve.
Well, I think it's fair to say, Gang, that, and by the way, this is Gang Tan, who is a new friend who I met last week on another union group, and invited in. But anyway, Gang, I think that, everybody needs to speak their mind, right? And certainly there are certain cases where financial aid doesn't help people, okay, and keeps them in poverty because they don't learn the skills to support themselves. But then there are other cases where people are left high and dry and they need some help. So, for example, Khushbu, who came up in a government home, an orphanage, literally an orphanage, and she's trying to deal with 6.7 million orphans in India right now as part of her calling. Those children would have nothing, and Khushbu would have had nothing if the government wasn't there to help her when she was 9 years old to grow up, and yet she's done a lot of things after having that help from the government. So sometimes we need government help, and sometimes it's damaging. But I don't know. Do you have an opinion about that, Khushbu, since you're the one I'm talking about?
I think anyway, sorry. I think it's important to help them to make the basic needs, but it's even more important to educate them instead of just give them support. I think that's right. Even more critical for properly people to really educate, overcome.
Right. And it's a big problem that we have right now because we have the educational system in the U.S. has been watered down over the last 30 years or more, where they're no longer teaching social studies and so on. They're just happy if you can, open your mouth to talk to an employer, and if you can balance your checkbook, the powers that be are happy. Anyway, go ahead, Khushbu.
No, complete your sentence. I'm so sorry.
No, that I didn't really have anything further to say. Okay. Or yet, anyway.
Okay. Well, Gang. How do you pronounce it? Her name?
Jing is good. Jing.
Yeah. Jing. Okay. Jing. So she said in the last day, education is necessary, and I think everybody, like, yeah, that's a like that's a child right, right? But the thing is that you see, you don't think about intellectual needs when physical needs are in the front line. You know, your safety, your sufficient food, sufficient nutrition, uh, uh, living in the crowded space, as simple as that, not having uh, so I, and there is what I'm talking about, there is a actually biological impact to it. If you see neonatal care where let's imagine there are small, like, uh, cradles, they say, like, where small babies are kept in the what is it called? So anyways, imagine,
Incubator or something?
yeah, but in the home environment, not in the
Okay.
hospital.
Crib.
Crib. So
Yeah.
imagine if imagine, like, there are four or five children together, right? So when they cry, somebody will come and attend them, right? So they cry and somebody come and attend them. I saw it, like, more than 40 uh, crib was there in one hall. They all were orphan children under 2 months, and nobody was crying. Only one child was crying. And I am a new social worker over there, so I'm getting all hyper because one child is crying. Why nobody is going? What happened? All of those things. So the senior staff told me that, oh, you will get used to it. Before you, that child will get used to it. So they don't cry. But in first 2-3 days they cry a lot, and they just realize it in that very early stage in life that nobody is gonna come if I cry. So again it goes back that deep. So those children don't cry, and so intellectual needs are met or not met. It's again, so countries like India, I can talk for India, that I'm sure we might not be able to give our children. No, we don't have that resources. In fact, we have to make sure that we feed all of them. For now, we will focus on that, and we have to focus on that.
Did you see the movie Line? It's an Indian movie. I'm not sure it's very real.
Yeah.
Is it
yeah.
is a real story?
Yeah, it's a true story.
Yeah. So they were actually.
What is the
it's
movie?
called Line. It's about this Indian boy who actually was lost it on the train, went to another country nearby, and he was taken by somebody as orphan to adopt by Australian family. And as he grew up, he had this existential crisis and trying to find his own family. It's pretty interesting. Yeah, pretty powerful.
It's called Lion. Is that right?
Yeah, I saw that movie. That was an excellent movie.
Yeah, and that is a true story, as I recall.
Yeah, with Nicole
Dev
Kidman.
Patel is an excellent Gujarati.
Yeah, that's interesting. So anyway, Khushbu is both a proof and a disproof of your points, Gun.
I think maybe I haven't dealt with, but actually through my kids, I realized that too. My kids have a lot of allergies, and he's very smart kids, but he doesn't want to study a lot because there are a lot of homeworks. And I'm not really agree with education system at all. You know, in U.S., I think they don't really teach them how to independently thinking, but rather teach all this knowledge, become a good employee basically, and you have to listen to teacher and all this. Like, this is not the way to educate people. Yeah. Anyway, maybe the private school, they're educate people to lead people, then the public school just teach the good employee to follow the order. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
So Jean, I will suggest you an author called Rudolf Steiner. So Rudolf Steiner, he's also kind of a Jungian era. He came out in Jungian era when he was alive, and I think they also communicated with each other. There are things like that. So he has a very beautiful approach to the education system, and it says that even I think it is like neurodevelopment also, it is true that till 7 years, children only copy. They don't intellectualize.
Mhm.
They copy you only. And so even to write A, they will just keep copying, and they'll learn how to write A, right? They will not know from one point to that point to that point to that point. They just keep copying, and then they learn, they know. So all this theories, I think, about child cognitive development and how it is embedded into a spiritual development, which again, and then there is ego development and the attachment and detachment with unconscious. So you might like to explore it. It's called the author is called Rudolf Steiner. Am I pronouncing it right?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not a great expert on Steiner's work, but at least I know that much.
I wanted to give up on social work so many times, so I learned dance movement therapy to become a therapist, and I learned Rudolf Steiner's education to help out people who want to do homeschooling, basically. So yeah, that is how I know these things. You went to the how do I say, store also today, and you are coughing now.
No, I sometimes I try to drown myself on my own spit. So that was one of those experiences.
Okay.
I had myself altered about 21 years ago, where I was having terrible allergies. So Jean, this is for you too. I was having terrible allergies, and finally, in my late 50s, I had the whole back of my throat removed, including the uvula and a lot of other flesh back there. And that has helped me quite a bit, because there's nothing to be inflamed anymore.
Oh,
Okay, right? All
that's
that.
that's bad.
No,
Anyway,
no.
I'm listening to Huangdi Neijing recently. I was learning a lot about Chinese medicine, and they were talking about actually allergy. I know my friends know this Chinese doctor in New Jersey actually use Chinese medicine treat allergy. The allergy in the end is about low immune system, basically.
Right.
And we have so sterilized the environment, so people develop less resistant to all the lower immune system. And so the problem is a lot of Western medicine is they cure the symptom, not the cause. Like you have for example, you have a joint problem, they just replace the joint, but they don't know why you have a joint problem. It's related to the heart, maybe. They say they treat you holistically. I found it fascinating because everybody will encounter some type of problem with their body, and the more we end it, the more we can take care of it, and so we can do other things we like. Yeah.
Right. Well, I certainly have had allergy problems all my life, but which originally manifested as asthma, and it got my father stationed on the Mojave Desert for 3 years to clear it when I was a young boy, and then to Kodiak, Alaska, the opposite extreme. That were 2 duty stations in a row. But one of the things that has helped me is just moving house from place to place. My body, allergies are a reaction of the immune system, right? And so in moving from place to place, I find that I'm not allergic to an area at the beginning. And then after a while, I start to develop allergies. My immune system starts to resist. And so, for example, I went to Vietnam for 9 months, and in my 9 months in Vietnam, I only sneezed twice in the entire time I was there. When I went back to Japan in business for 5 years, at the beginning, I was having no problems in Japan, but then in about the 5th year, it started to become a problem for me. And so those are my personal experiences on this. But anyway, I was hoping we'd get more from Mike about advice for Khushbu, but it didn't work out that way. Mike is a fairly reticent fellow. But he has been very active over many years, and he's gone to Wisconsin and gone door to door to try to recall Scott Walker, among other things, and but he's had himself a very successful life, and maybe far more successful than me. I'm always feast or famine.
I would like to give a little advice to Khushbu.
Okay, go for it.
Mahatma Gandhi had a wonderful saying. He said, be the change that you wish to be. And so just be yourself. You're a very big-hearted, compassionate woman. And I always believe that you changed the world one-on-one. I mean, the man did that himself too. He was a perfect example of that. One man can change the whole, or let's just say make an impact. And just as like you, Skip, you've had your impact, and every single person here, Miles and Deborah and whoever else is in this group, you may not know it, but I'm sure you've touched somebody's life just by your smile or your encouragement, or just by your presence, meaning, the character of who you are and how you conduct yourself with a lot of respect and caring, and just exuding and irradiating that love that you have for another human being. So one of my heroes, again, we talk about, in Young and Joseph Campbell, who is your hero and what is your hero's journey? And the heroes that you have in your mind are your mentors, and your kind of like your template of who you want to become. So one of them was, or is, Mother, or now she's Saint Teresa, who went all by herself in the bowels of Calcutta back in the early 1940s. And during the time there was a great caste system. And here you have this Yugoslavian woman, who's a foreigner, who can't really speak Hindu, but she went out there because she had this calling to help humanity. And I do remember one incident. I read her books, and I even watched the movie The Letters. The Letters was kind of like a biography of Mother Teresa. And she told of one story, or how she was moved by her work and why she just kept on going at what she did, because she came across a lot of poverty and people just dying on the streets, where people would just walk across their bodies and just now these are Indian people, their own kind, just walking across a dead body, and like, you know, this was like normal. That was their normalcy. And she was kind of like shocked and, you know, appalled. And she would run over to a person that's dying on the street, rat bitten in the face and barely holding on to life. And she would hold the man's head and hold his hand, and with his last breath, look up to her and say to her, thank you. I didn't think anybody loved me or cared for me. And that really touched her heart. And she wanted to continue on with her work. And look what it brought. Okay.
Yeah,
I mean,
sure.
There's now lots of organizations and sisterhoods that are out there all over the world doing the same thing that Mother Teresa did. So, you know, we don't look for glory. And every time she was asked to talk or being interviewed, she just totally avoid being interviewed, because she would say, look, you know, I have more important things to do than interviews. So she never wanted to be the limelight. She just wanted to continue on with her work. And so, like, the big saying is, we do know great things. We only do little things with big hearts. So that was her big motto. And to this day, you know, I really, that really resonates with me. So we don't have to do anything splashy, and we don't have to force the government or force people to change. They will automatically change in a very, you know, tender and touching way, just by being in your presence. So you are the message. Like,
Right.
God would say on the train, when the reporter said, Gandhi, what is your message? And he looked over and he looked at the crowd and says, my life is my message.
Sure.
So just conduct yourself the way you would want to be, the person that you want to be the change in the world. And just remember, love your brother as you would love yourself. Because again, as we know in Jung, that when we look at you, we are looking at the God or goddess within you. And likewise, the other person, hopefully, if they're aware, they're looking the same thing too, that we're mirroring the spirit, the God within us. That's it.
Say something. So I think different people come with a different gift. So we have different way to helping the world or ourselves. Like, I think I really admire people have a big heart to helping a lot of people. I'm so scared when I see the bad things. And I also think I didn't grow up actually grew up in China pretty poor, but the good thing is in China at the time, everybody is poor. So I think what they said is not the condition of your things that harms people, is the difference. So if everybody is poor, we grew up poor in China. 5 of us live in a single room, and we add another room next to it. Just it's such bad condition, but everybody is happy.
Yeah.
We don't feel, terrible. We feel pretty at all, and we hardly can afford to buy new clothes or whatever. But we don't feel that. In China now, people they have so much more materials. They're not happy at all. I think that it's not what you have, it's what your neighbors have to make you happy or not happy.
Maybe, but that's what I observed about Bangladesh also. It's one of the most poor countries of the world, and yet I found the people there always with a smile and always happy.
Yeah.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yes. I just want to also say, Gary, that I've been to Taiwan and Shanghai. Didn't go to Beijing, but I was there with a spiritual group, and meditation group. And I'm from Hawaii, okay, and we went there. Well, for one thing, it was my first time in China. And in the spiritual group, we wanted to spread just our, so we were actually a very quiet group and a very happy group, and we were touring around like tourists. But I remember they meaning the government, warning us that
warning you what? I didn't hear it. Warning you what?
They were warning us that we're not really allowed to express our religion because they're
scared.
Correct, gang. But
yeah, the government is so scared. That's why I studied Carl Jung. Yes. I realized.
Yeah. But
this is exactly what people need in China, because if they really want to change the country, the people have to be able to think for themselves, have independent thinking. Then they can no longer rule like Hitler or whatever, or the Xi Jinping, what he's trying to do right now. It's just the reverse the history. You know, he's trying to be the dominant dictatorship.
Excuse me. Just a point of information, Skip. I've invited a friend to join, so just be on the lookout for somebody trying to join. Sorry, ladies, go ahead, carry on.
Okay.
Well, hopefully it's not.
Yeah, well,
so I wanted to just give one little example here. So we were out in the park, a group there were about 20 of us, and what we were doing was we were dancing and singing in the park. Okay, and this was our way of actually bringing the happy energy, joyous energy. But you know what? What we were actually doing was what we call mindfulness meditation, but in the form of dance and singing. So nobody knew that we were actually doing a religious ritual, but we were doing it right then and there in the park, and people, the local people were looking at us, and they were also smiling and they were joyous. But some of them knew, we could tell when they came up to us that we were meditating and we were showing our spirituality. But everybody that we came across were actually quite spiritual, very, very, very spiritual. And we just loved it.
That's what Tai Chi is, after all.
Yeah, exactly.
Meditating. So Miles, your friend came. I hit the, join as a panelist, but she hasn't come on. So I don't.
Oh, okay. Well, maybe she'll try again.
I thought
she's just gonna say hi, so and
okay.
just meet the group.
Oh, here she is, maybe.
Oh, there she is.
There she is. Hi, Jackie. Welcome.
Yeah. So this is Jackie. She's in Phoenix, Arizona, or Jackie. Actually a little south of Phoenix, and she knows Kushbu, and she's a good friend, and I'm sure she'll enjoy this group as well. So. She has an organization. She's starting an initiative called Seeds to Inspire. Welcome, Jackie.
Thank you, Miles.
So, Jackie, tell us about your organization.
Thank you.
As long as you're here.
Thank you. I appreciate it. It's a social justice education nonprofit. Mm-hmm. And what we do is we go into the underserved, underrepresented, marginalized communities, our local communities, to bring awareness of health, mind, body, spirit. We bring awareness of social injustices and how the practices that we partake in every day are actually unconsciously maintaining the systems in place that keep these communities oppressed. I live in Arizona, but I'm originally from New York. And so these are the kind of efforts and resources that I would have appreciated as a young child growing up in the projects in underrepresented communities. So now that I've learned and I've been able to heal myself from not only trauma, but disease, and I can live my best life, I just felt a moral obligation to go back to my local community that reflects my experience and to be of service.
Well, we have a lot of people who are trying to be of service here, that's for sure. And so it's nice to meet you and have you join the group. That's very nice. And
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
yeah, so we should have you as a featured guest sometime.
Oh, that would be lovely. Thank you.
Yeah, we the way this is developed now, just so you know, and Jing is so Tang Xiaojie, you're saying your name is Jean?
Actually, my name in Chinese is Tan Geng, but I found a lot of people have a hard time to say Geng, so I changed to Jing because it's easier for Americans to say Jing. So Geng is
but it's
it's harder for them to say. It sounds very manly. So I just use Jing instead.
Oh well, my mother's name was Jean, but I can say Gun too. So
Yeah, I can say gang too.
yeah, I don't.
It
That's
sounds weird.
that's weird.
And in
But
China, we never say the name individually. We say Tan Geng without say together. That's why I'm not used to call Geng anyway.
Oh.
Tango.
American
Actually, at one
that
time I have a name as Tango. So, but then I thought it's not very professional. So I changed later because my older friend called me Tango because like I like dancing too. So it's like my name together sound like Tango.
wow.
Tango.
So you are in America, right? Like
Yeah, I'm in
where are
Seattle
you?
right now.
She lives in Seattle,
Oh.
but she was born in China, and
Yeah, I came
Sure,
here in
but
1997.
oh my God, you are an American now.
yeah,
Sure.
yeah.
Your name has it. Your name has it.
Yeah. Well, we all give up our names when we come to the United States, unfortunately or fortunately, because I'm the 13th in a direct line of first son, so I should have the same surname as my first ancestor in North America, first European ancestor. But his name was Wilfert Gerritsen, and so in Holland, sen means son of, right? So literally his name at that time in the early 17th century was Wilfred, son of Garrett. Okay, Wilfred Gerritsen. Okay, so then he comes to the New World, and they have to say where he's from. So it's von Kohenhofen, from Kohenhofen, which is this small village, or was a small village. Now it's at the center of Amersfoort in Holland. So his name became Wilfred Gerritsen van Kohenhoven. But the British couldn't say, or didn't want to say, van Kohenhoven. So in 1820, one of my ancestors' names was changed to Conover. So that's where we get my name. But it's like that. It's happened to all of us, Tangun Xiaojie. So, or
Thank God I'm not in America.
yeah. Well, you could keep Kantaria nowadays, but should I be saying Tantaite, huh? Probably
In
so.
China, when you call Mrs. something, you call the husband's last name, not the not the last name of the, which is no longer popular. Just like America, I think. You said Mrs. Smith. Do people still change their last name nowadays?
Well, my wife
when they get married?
hasn't. Yeah, a lot of people do. My daughters did.
Yeah, I have some. Actually, I have a lot of American friends. They don't. Maybe that's why they're my friends.
Yeah,
So
but my wife's name, my wife's surname is McLaughlin. She didn't take my name. when we married. But my first wife kept my name. Funny as that may seem, but then she married another man, and now her name is Claire Conover Royce. But she still uses my name in her name. So that's
Jackie. I just thought I'd explain to Jackie, since she's new to this group, that Skip Conover here has just been talking. This is his channel, and he has over 1,000 videos that he's created about the collected works of the psychologist pioneer Carl Jung. So that would be of interest to you, because I know Dr. Molina, your friend Dr. Oscar Molina, is also very interested in Jung. So just for your information, this is part of a series that Skip and his friend Tim Holmes, who's an artist in Montana, have created. And they are hosting these events on a regular basis and bringing very interesting people. So right now, we've had a guest speaker, and now we're just sort of chit-chatting. But there's quite a bit of really deep thinking goes on here, right. And I'm sure you'll enjoy it and check out the previous guests.
So you really came upon us at the end of our session, near the end. I'm not going to arbitrarily end it, but so we've been doing, let's see, two things mainly. Okay, one thing is, as new people have come in, like Gung Jaja or you or Kushbu, we ask them to tell us their story, and these stories are often quite poignant, and so on this channel you should look at Kushbu's story. It was quite a poignant story, and
I've had the pleasure. I've watched your story.
Oh, you did? Okay. So
yes, I did.
You know that all of us wept at some point during our story, and Tim was definitely weeping at the end. But
yeah, as was I. I was very touched, and I've had the pleasure to have a one-on-one conversation with her. I just find her amazing. I told her we're like long lost auntie and niece somewhere on the other side of the world, because our stories are parallel so much, and the work in our heart are so similar.
So that's a good thing that we're doing. So that's one thing we're doing is we're hearing one another's stories, and in the process of that, we're also helping others to see that maybe their story is also survivable. Okay.
And becoming friends.
And becoming friends in the process. And so Kushbu, I had intended to do a lot 30 minutes to this morning, and I ended up with her for about 3 hours, I think. But it was good. She and I cooked up a way that she could make a living. So that was a good thing. And she could tell you all about it separately. You might want to use it. But
that's a secret. That's a secret.
Okay, that's a secret. Okay, I'm not going to tell the secret.
Yeah. First rule of mentor you broke already. What is this? On the live YouTube channel.
Well, but I haven't told the secret. I haven't told the secret. And so anyway, Kushbu is destined to great things, I think. And it just amazingly, last Saturday night, we had a very interesting story from Nicole, our friend Nicole from Australia, who had a very rough time with her husband after having a very good time with her husband. I mean, there were there were 20 wonderful years, and then things fell apart. And that's sort of the story of the world. You know, W.B. Yeats wrote a poem that I'm going to have to look up, but one of the verses about it is the center cannot hold, things fall apart, is what he's talking about. And so the point is that for all of us, it's the story of all of us. We pull our life together, and we're able to support a family or have a family or whatever it is in one way or another. And it doesn't mean necessarily having a child per se, because, for example, my wife has a calling which is to work with people who are dying. And literally her work is with a hospice. And she's a Buddhist lama, basically, although she's not ordained. And so our whole life around here is all about death, believe it or not. But her and she has no children of her own, but she shares my children by transference, which is a psychological concept. And so they think of her as Grandma Debbie and so on. And so we all make our contribution to the great mosaic of life. And you know, I think part of the purpose of telling this story is so that other people who may be going through difficult times can hear, you know, that more or less everybody goes through hell one way or another. You know, it doesn't matter who you are. You know, even our president, I don't think there's anybody that thinks that he's a happy man right now. You know, he's achieved every material thing one could achieve, and yet he hasn't found
and making entire world laugh at entire America and himself.
Everybody's laughing at him in the world, and I don't think there's anybody that, including he, that could say that he's a happy man and that he has a happy life. And so the key to happiness isn't in material things, right?
Yeah.
Because I've had very successful years and then been totally destroyed numerous times, not just once. But fortunately, when I was raised in the Navy and my whole world would change every 2 years or something, you know, I just got used to it. So I've always been able to find my bearings again. And so I think that's a valuable message to people who might be listening to these conversations. And much to my surprise, there are many people who listen to these videos for 2 hours or 3 hours. And Nicole's from last Saturday has already had nearly 300 hits. And you know, in my experience, if you influence one person, that influences 10 others in some way. I mean, they may not refer exactly to your video, but they have remembered something that they want to say to a friend, and it influences people. And so it's good to have you here. It's very nice to have you here, and we'd be very interested in hearing your story if you want to tell it.
Oh, I would love to. And just hearing what you were saying, the whole purpose of the name of the organization, Seeds to Inspire, was again born of that need to plant seeds and to honor the sovereignty of every being to make their own choices. Yeah. But I felt a moral obligation to have people live in truth that have been
Yeah.
denied all of the truth, so that they have agency to make their own choices. And I think that's
Right.
where the injustice is that we don't have all the truth, so we can make our own educated, informed choices for our own lives.
Right. I think that's very true. And
Yeah, that we were talking about education in American. I think it's kind of like damning people in some way. So basically,
Oh my gosh. Yes,
yeah,
yes.
it's
I
like
just had a conversation with my son this morning who's graduating high school. I have twins, but one of them has Asperger's, and he has gone through 5 schools since 4th grade because of the struggles and the social injustices. And I've had to fight the education system because of the push out and the discrimination and just not wanting to spend the money on services for children that learn differently.
yeah,
So
exactly.
that really awakened me to the complete disaster of our educational system. That's how I became an education activist with the ACLU, was when I realized what was going on. It was just this compulsory education. So I was telling him this morning, when you graduate, that is a celebration.
yeah.
Because of the education system here is not designed for neurodiversity.
Well,
It doesn't welcome creative thinking.
Yeah, exactly. They were
And it-
repressing it.
We're autonomous.
They make all
We're
machines.
factory farms.
right.
Yeah,
And,
exactly.
and as Miles may have told you, we have a couple of members here who are on the Asperger spectrum, and they're terrific contributors to what
I tell
we're
my
doing.
son all the time that Asperger's autism is a leap in evolution. That is truly in my heart what I believe. And it has been one of the biggest honors of my life, not only to be a mother, but to bear witness and observe the mind and the neurodiversity of children that learn differently. It has been such a privilege and an honor to learn, and humbling for myself to learn that the beauty that they contribute to this planet and to the way we think and to the ethers.
Yeah, we're all in awe of Greta Thunberg as an example, and
Jackie, I'll just add for your information, to meet these 2 wonderful friends of ours, they join in what's called the advanced reading group, and Skip will give you his email if you would like to join that group. And your son would probably enjoy to see the contributions of our friends too.
Yeah,
Oh,
and
that'd be wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, they also have joined a few of these sessions as well, but they don't tend to want to interact in this setting, but they do listen very intently, and so well, Miles can give you my email address, and then we can correspond and talk about that in more detail. But the point is that everybody needs to know what people who've experienced life already know, which is every life is screwed up somehow. Okay, it's like I'm seeing this in so many movies now, but especially in the movie Titanic, where we all board the ship of life, and some of us may go to the first class cabin, and some of us may go to steerage, but ultimately we have the same destination and the same result. Right. Eventually we're going to hit an iceberg, and when we hit that iceberg, we have to be seaworthy, is what I call it. How do you become seaworthy? And so I think Pushbu's story has been amazing, but also, as I was saying about Nicole's story, as she was telling it, a few times in my life, I've seen a change come over someone just by something that's happening. And in Nicole's case, at 2 hours, 12 minutes and 40 seconds, I saw this change happen in her. She was talking about how she'd hit it, you know, how everything was fine on the Titanic, you know, and then how they hit an iceberg and starts to fill up with water and different things are happening to her. But at that moment, 2 hours, 12 minutes, and 40 seconds of that video, I saw her change. I saw her make the leap from being someone who was a victim of life to someone who is Sophia. Okay, Sophia is the feminine principle. Okay, and it's just an incredible video. And
Well, she called herself Love Doctor now.
well, she called herself Love Doctor before, but you know, before her talk, I thought she was a love doctor who was repairing marriages, but that's not what she is at all. Whether she realized it or not, maybe she did, but she's a love doctor of love for the universe, not just for individuals and individual situations. And that was quite an impressive thing to see. And I literally saw it at that moment, you know. So go back and look at that video. It's very powerful. But the problem with it is you can't go to that point in the video and see the change unless you watch the whole thing, right? But I definitely saw it, definitely. Maybe I'm more intuitive than other ones, but very powerful. So on Saturday night, which will be 7:00 p.m. Arizona time and Seattle time, but 10:00 for me and 8:00 for Tim. We're going to be having Nick Chan, who is a regular member. He's from Singapore, and he's going to tell us his story. So anyway, Jackie, we can communicate and see when you would be available.
It would be my privilege. It really, really would, especially since it comes from, it doesn't start there, but my aha moment, my transformation began, my awakening when my 11-year-old passed away.
Oh my goodness.
And I think it's the most painful, but the most beautiful gift that he could have ever given me.
And is he one of the twins or?
No, the twins were 7 when he passed.
We're 7 when he passed. And what caused that?
Stevens-Johnson syndrome.
Okay, I don't know what that is.
It's a severe allergic reaction to pharmaceuticals.
Oh my goodness.
Very rare, 1 in a million.
Wow.
He should never have been prescribed it. And he suffered tremendously. He spent 10 days in excruciating pain. He was transferred to a burn unit and had to be put into a coma for the pain, and he passed while he was in the coma.
Oh boy, that's so sad. You know, as my mother also lost my brother, not at 11, but we lost him when he was 39. And he struggled for many years. He got Giardia from the Columbia River, and he was living in Vail, Colorado. And one summer, the water table went down under the intake for the water treatment plant in Vail. And so for the summertime, they were bringing water buffalo, which are these trailers, over to the reservoir, and just taking water directly out of the reservoir and bringing it into town. And people were drinking it. And that happened when he was like 22. And when he was 39, he had 3 liver transplants, and then he died. In that year, in that 10-week period, he had 15 major surgeries. So unfortunately that can happen, and it's really a tragedy for a parent to lose a child that way, no doubt. You know, the good thing I can say about my brother's life is that he would, while it was difficult for him in some ways, he got to go to Vail and spend 15 years there skiing mostly and having a ball. He really had, it's like he had a 15-year vacation. So he had his dessert first, which is, we named our boat Dessert First, and we're very glad. We had a power boat, which I've given to one of my daughters now, and we named it Dessert First, and we enjoyed it very much. But we're glad we did it when we did, because nowadays I've had 2 joint replacements, and so I can't go flying around the deck of a boat anymore. And it's probably better for me because I was wasting too much time on boats.
That's not wasting. Time on boats are not wasted. Come on.
No, it's, well,
don't say things like that.
No, it's good. It's good meditation. It was good meditation, but I didn't know where it was going. And we're active in our local yacht club, and but I joined the yacht club in 1997, and after that, as soon as I joined, I never really touched another boat. Or the boat and the yacht club never connected. Okay, on just one occasion after 1997, I took that boat to the dock of the yacht club, and the dock master made me leave. He said, "You can't be here." And so after that, I only played contract bridge at the yacht club. I never did any boating through the yacht club, and now I can't even do that, because I don't know if you know, but, and you probably don't care, but there's a lot of older, white people who play bridge a lot, mostly, and now with social distancing, you really can't play bridge, because among other things, there's a duplicate bridge. You have a hand that gets put in a plastic holder, and it gets passed around, so the different tables all play the same hand. That's the way you do duplicate bridge, right? And so it's entirely inappropriate to have somebody holding a piece of plastic that you're going to pass to all the other old people. And people have been breathing over it and so on. So contract bridge is over, basically.
Can they do online bridge?
Pardon? Oh yeah,
Online.
well, I have done a fair amount of online bridge. It's okay, but it's not the same as the social bridge. So, but anyway, I started to get bored with the people that I was playing with.
Yeah, I have the same problem.
Oh, you do?
So I live in Bellevue, and I work from home. I have my own business. And I hung out with a lot of stay-home mom. They really enjoy their life, like gardening, they were recently tagged me on the Facebook binge watching TV series. I said, I don't even watch TV series. Take me with me too much time. I have no time for TV series.
Right,
so it's like, I really like them, I like hang out with them, but it's just not enough. I want to know more. That's why I joined Landmark training, which is very helpful. But I'm so glad I found your guys' group and the other philosophy group. It's very inspiring to see you guys, because I think we are not lack of resource. It's just the distribution. You know, in my neighborhood, I see a lot of waste, you know, and kids have too much and they don't appreciate it.
Oh yeah.
I think, it's just like the connection, you know, the people just live in their own circle and bubble. They don't understand what other people need. If we have better understanding and better distribution, we have no problem with resource. You know, I think that's really the problem.
Yeah.
Abundance. There is an abundance which we can see, but we still are suffering for having no resources. It's at the same time.
Well, fortunately, as I was growing up, we were poor, but I didn't know it, because I grew up in the military. And so my mother always had just enough money to buy food. And so I never was want for any food, right? But, you know, we didn't have, she would shop every 2 weeks at the commissary. And so we didn't always have ice cream, for example. And I love ice cream. and so in my adulthood, I always had ice cream around, but now I don't do it so much. Now I go to Italian ice. It's not quite as fattening. And so I'm losing weight, but.
Well, I had about the earlier conversation before we all went on the boat.
Yes, go ahead.
About death. So I was a child whose life was changing because adults around me was dying. You know, as simple as that. But a lot of, I don't know, they never left. In Harry Potter, they say, no, that the one who loves, they live in heart, so they never leave. The resurrection stone.
Yeah, that's what I found.
Yeah, so like I know people who didn't leave, like did not leave, you know, and I have been very good girl because of it, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, I think Jackie must know this too, that you, even though your son isn't physically with you, he's still spiritually with you as much as he ever was, I'm sure.
That's actually what fueled my healing and my work. Is I knew at that moment, that crucial moment, when I was leaving the hospital and I was leaving his body there, and that kind of that dissonance came, like, but I'm going home, but I'm leaving my son in the hospital. And it was just kind of like reality hitting. And I knew at that moment that I had to release his form, because I was always going to be his mother. And now, how do I represent, how do I connect with my son in formlessness? And how do I allow that love now to transmute me in this experience and honor his life, and not be lost in the 10 days of his loss, but to honor the 11 years that he was with me and move forward and carry that with me. So he's been gone 11 years. So this is it's a beautiful year for me, because it's truly, he would have been 22. He's been gone 11 years in form, but he was with me 11 years. And so that fuels me, and I feel him in everything I do, and I feel his presence.
Yeah, no doubt. And, you know, I feel my parents and my brother just as much as I ever did. And I know that fact. And, you know, people think that you have to be famous, you know, a Buddha or a Jesus Christ or Muhammad, peace be upon him, to make a difference. But the fact is that that we're all living the life that our first single-celled organism parents wanted us to live. Okay, intended for us to live. And so, and people don't normally think back that far, but you know, you have to think about the fact that all of your ancestors have done two things successfully. They've survived until they reproduced or produced something. But in all of our cases, our ancestors have survived until they reproduced. Those two things they did all the way back to single-celled organisms. And so that spirit is passing through every generation from there to us. And you know, so we have to, each of us, seek what they sought and live it out. And I guess that's a sort of a message of sorts. And I don't know. I think I suppose that's enough for today. This has been an interesting day for me today.
May I say something, Skip?
Yeah, please.
Our family deals with a little different type of death. My brother, who is 2.5 years older than I am, committed suicide at 53 years old. That's a real tough one for a family to get through. And I feel my brother, and my mother feels my brother. But my other two brothers who are still living absolutely hate him, will not speak of him, will not have a picture of him in the house. They just hate him. And yet I still feel his presence. And I don't burning in hell for taking his own life. But it's a real tough one for a family to go through because you never get over it.
Right.
So another side of that, I guess.
Well, I'm sure that your other brothers, if they're guided in the right way, will probably change their tune over time.
They're angry.
They're angry that he committed suicide.
Yes. And he basically said before he took his life, he was going through a lot of drugs and alcohol and this kind of stuff. Yeah. But he literally said, I'm doing this to hurt the family. And he succeeded.
Okay. Well, you know, that's
well,
it's hard to get over.
Yeah, it's hard to get over.
You reach out. My mother and I, both of us, more me, because I'm kind of the family person, that I'm the middle child. I hold the family together many times. And if I try to talk about him, they just get angry and refuse to do it. I try to tell them he was hurting, he was suffering, he was an alcoholic, he was a drug addict. You know, he was hurting. So his way of getting back was getting back his family. And I try to reach out with love for them to understand. Remember
it's not intellectual. The thing is that I have dealt with suicide very on my skin, you know, on my skin, and my mother, actually. I was the one confronted it. And
Kishma, that's why your story was so hard. I know I cried.
I know who is angry, why like I know the anger. You cannot verbalize it. It's like the more you love, the more you cannot forgive, you know?
Yeah.
So and you can.
I think maybe, maybe you can bring your brothers to Landmark in your local chapter, because I see a lot of families, they have this kind of family conflict. They actually help them to solve it somehow, you know. So maybe you can give it a try.
What is it?
All reconcile.
What is the What is it?
It's a landmark international self-development group. So they have different training. Usually you bring, I see so many families, they said they don't talk to their kids for like 20 years and they end up, oh, they're brothers, and they end up all go through the training. Because I know like it's 3 days training is actually quite effective in some way, because not everybody can learn. You know, if you learn this theory like Carl Jung, it takes 10, 20 years. Not everybody spend that time to do it. But this is kind of like somebody, like group therapy, like group of people, they share their experience and learn from their experience. And a lot of people, you know, their family reconcile, their best, many people, they didn't speak their brother, mother, their fathers, or their kids, then they end up actually form very good relationship.
Can you spell the name of the organization? Because my hearing isn't so great that I can hear it.
Okay, yeah, let me type in the chat.
Okay.
Landmark, is that correct?
So they are international,
LAND.
so you can find out their group in your local chapter, then just check it out. So they usually have free introductions. You can just see. We went through a friend, so we went to see it, and we think it's, you know, quite interesting. My husband and me, we both go through the training, advanced training. The advanced training actually is quite interesting. It's about how you solve the problem, your personal problem, on a higher level, like community level, social level, you know, like international level. That's actually what you guys are doing. You know, you have a personal experience or challenges or whatever, and then you solve it in a higher level. Then you have more impact in the society. Like Martin Luther King was discriminated against, and he didn't hold it personally. He solved it in a more higher level. You know, like that's how you make an influence in the world, which is quite powerful. Yeah, they actually have a lot of nonprofit organizations formed through the members who went through the training. Right. Like preventing suicide, whatever. It's quite interesting.
Yeah, well, obviously that's a big issue right now, because we have three people in our close relationships who have died from drug overdoses in the last 3 years. And, you know, just besides coronavirus, we have this other epidemic, which is drug abuse, and you know, both of them are now worse than the Vietnam War every year.
Yeah. When we were at the training, they asked who knows people who has depression or drug. They're like more than 2/3 of people in the room put up their hands. It's crazy, you know. Like I think I came from China, so I come from the country we don't have much things. So people actually, the immigrant here work very hard. They are very excited to make a difference. But I think when the people grow up here, they have, I think, like Dalai Lama said, when your basic needs fulfilled, this income of $70,000-$80,000, whatever it is, to make a regular living, then you have more needs. It doesn't make any influence to your well-being anymore. Whatever you have is the spiritual needs. I think we no longer have religion, and there's nothing to guide people. People need this spiritual growth. They don't know where to fulfill it. Then they get depressed. They take drugs to numb themselves, basically. That's what's happening right now. If you struggle in a lot of third world country, people struggle with basic living, which may be a black. They don't need to worry about others' mental or they were dealing with a physical challenge, take all their energies, you know. But here in America, it's just a different type of challenge. It's harder to resolve even.
Yeah, sure. And you know, this is why I favor going back to religions, but going back to religions, whatever the religion, in a knowing way, understanding what the religion is doing for you, instead of accepting a child's fairy tale religion, right? And so this brings up, this brings up one of the purposes here, which comes in a quote from Jung, which I'll read to you. I only found it a couple of weeks ago because it's in a rather obscure book that he put it in, but It's called, he says, I conceive it to be the duty of everyone who isolates himself by taking his own path of individuation to tell others what he has found or discovered, whether it be a refreshing spring for the thirsty or a sandy desert of sterile error. And one helps, the other warns. And so, you know, in a way, that's what we do here, is we try to help or warn.
And I think, yeah,
Go ahead.
individuation. And I think this brings us to prayer time.
Yeah, prayer time, because we've been going a long while here. But
Usually
we're going
Jocelyn gives us such a nice summary, though. I wonder if she would.
Joss, do you have a final comment here before we go on?
Okay, the final comment of all this, because we did a lot of chit-chatting and just getting to know one another, and all this chit-chatting looks like, you know, it's superficial, but what we are really doing is connecting, and our spirits actually are doing the connecting in our unconscious way, and it's bringing our hearts together. And in this heart group, we're again, I'm emphasizing again, we're creating this wonderful positive energy that we are emanating outward beyond what this group is, even past YouTube and really out into the universe. And that is why I'm here, okay? Because we may have our politics, and it may irk us to hear another one, and, you know, opposites don't, you know, sometimes they clash. But really, if it's a training, you have to kind of go beyond that and see beyond the persona and see the person with the beautiful, joyful, blissful energy that we all carry, because we are a bunch of energy molecules that are vibrating. And hopefully, let's lift our energy vibration upward, because that is the language in which the universe speaks. Thank you.
Thank you. And so, Jackie and Jean, you may not know, I don't know if you know or not, but Sanskrit is a spiritual language. So Khushbu is going to give us a mantra in Sanskrit. It was designed by the Indians over thousands of years to touch human beings at a very deep level, okay? And so the meaning of this mantra is, may everyone be happy, may all the worlds be happy. And so, you know, I just ask you to give it the benefit of the doubt, to let it touch you very deeply. It so happens that I'm extremely intuitive. So for my psyche, it touches me down to the bottom of my soul. And so if you just give it a listen, without understanding, because you don't have to understand. It's a series of, Sanskrit is really a series of sounds that can reach your soul at a deep level. And so just give it that chance, that benefit of the doubt. So Khushbu, you're up.
Thank you so much. Entire language is grateful of yours. I'm very sure about it. I am having to study that language. So yeah. Okay. Sukha Sukhino bhavantu loka samanta sukhino bhavantu loka samanta sukhino bhavantu. Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. God bless you.
Thank you. So peace, everyone. We'll see you Saturday night. It's 10 p.m. Eastern time, but none of you are in Eastern time, or except Lewis. Lewis is in Eastern time, and Deborah is in Eastern time. So it's 10 p.m. Saturday night for us, but for the rest of you, it's a little bit more decent hour. So thank you so much, Kushbu.
Aloha, everybody.
And
Aloha.
thank you for all your contributions. Good night. Goodbye.